The night lay heavy over the Apache camp, thick with the smell of smoke, sweat, and fresh blood. Fires burned low, their flames flickering like tired eyes that had seen too much. Warriors stood in silence, gripping spears that felt suddenly useless now that the fighting had ended. In the center of it all lay Talonbear, the chief who had led them for years, his powerful body still, his chest no longer rising. The earth beneath him was darkened where his life had spilled out, and no chant or prayer could call him back. Aiyana knelt beside him, her knees pressed into the cold ground. She had not screamed when he fell. She had not cried when the battle ended. Her grief sat deep inside her, heavy and unmoving, as if tears were far too small to carry it. One of her hands rested on Talonbear's chest, as though part of her still hoped to feel a heartbeat. Behind her, Nokomis clung to her shoulders, trembling. The younger sister's breath came in shallow gasps, each one filled with fear. This was not the world she knew. This was not the life she had imagined. Footsteps approached. Men from the rival tribe emerged from the shadows, their faces stern, their weapons lowered but ready. Their leader stepped forward, tall and unyielding. His voice cut through the silence as he spoke the terms of peace. The fighting would stop, he said, but only if Nokomis was given to him as his wife. A single demand, a single life exchanged for many. Nokomis let out a small broken sound. Her fingers tightened painfully in Aiyana's clothing. Around them, the Apache people murmured, torn between rage and desperation. Everyone understood what refusal would mean. More blood, more widows, more sisters left alone. Aiyana slowly rose to her feet. The firelight revealed the blood staining her dress, proof of what the night had already taken from her. She stepped forward, placing herself between the men and her sister. Her voice, when she spoke, was steady, too steady for someone who had just lost everything. "Don't take my sister," she said. "Take me." The words hung in the air, shocking and final. She lifted her chin, meeting the enemy leader's gaze without fear. "I am a widow. I know what it means to be a wife. I know loss, duty, and survival. She does not." Her voice softened but did not break. "I'd make a better wife. I'm experienced." In that moment, Aiyana sealed her fate, not as a victim, but as a woman who chose sacrifice so her sister could live. The morning light fell pale and cold over the dusty trail as Aiyana walked away from her tribe, leaving behind the only home she had ever truly known. Her sister, Nokomis, stood at the edge of the camp, wrapped in blankets and the sorrow of someone too young to understand, the weight of the world. Aiyana didn't look back, though every fiber of her being ached to. She could feel the warmth of her sister's gaze on her back, could hear the soft broken sobs, but she forced her legs forward, one careful step at a time. Each footfall on the rough ground reminded her of the life she had surrendered, not her own life exactly, but the small, quiet freedom of her existence before war had stolen everything from her. The rival tribe's encampment came into view at the edge of the plains. Tents stretched along the horizon, fires burning dimly, smoke curling lazily into the morning sky. She could sense every pair of eyes on her as she entered the open space. Some curious, some wary, and a few calculating. No one touched her. No one restrained her. Yet she felt the invisible weight of being the center of all attention, a living symbol of a peace bought with blood. She kept her head high, shoulders squared, and met the gaze of anyone who looked at her. She would not give them satisfaction by showing fear. Aiyana's first days among them were filled with quiet observation. She learned who was kind and who was cruel, who could be trusted and who could not. She helped tend fires, collected water, and treated minor injuries with the herbs she carried in a small leather pouch, a skill taught to her by her mother. Slowly, the whispers about her began to change. Where once there was talk of fear and ownership, now there was respect. They watched how she moved, how she spoke, how she treated the children and the sick with steady hands and calm eyes. They began to understand that she was no ordinary captive. She was someone who could not be broken easily. Ravenwolf, the man who had been designated her future husband, observed all of this silently. He expected resentment or perhaps fear. Instead, he saw someone who carried herself with quiet authority, someone who bore loss but did not bow to it. One evening by the dying fire, he asked why she had come here willingly. She met his gaze steadily. "For my sister," she said. and because someone had to be strong enough to stop the killing. Her words lingered in the night air, and even as whispers of another Apache attack reached the camp, Aiyana realized that her sacrifice might not be enough, but she would do everything she could to ensure her sister's safety, no matter the cost. The sun rose over the plains, casting long, golden streaks across the open land. But the tension in the air felt heavier than any darkness. The two tribes faced each other across the field, weapons glinting, horses stamping the dust in anxious rhythm. Every man and woman held their breath, waiting for the first signal, the first word, the first movement that would unleash bloodshed once more. Aiyana stepped forward, her boots pressing into the dry earth, and for a moment, the sound of the wind and the distant calls of birds seemed louder than the murmurs of the warriors. She felt the weight of every eye upon her, some curious, some skeptical, and some brimming with the expectation of violence. She did not falter. Her body, already scarred by grief and hardship, carried a quiet strength that seemed to radiate outward. She moved with purpose to the center, placing herself squarely between the opposing sides. Her hair, black as midnight, fell loosely over her shoulders, and the leather dress she wore, fringed, decorated with beads and fitted perfectly to her form, caught the sunlight in subtle flashes as she stood tall. She did not raise her voice to demand attention. Instead, she spoke with calm authority, the kind that silences before it convinces. "I gave myself to end this war," she said. "If blood is spilled again, then my sacrifice meant nothing." Her words resonated. She spoke not as a captive, nor as someone who had been chosen for another's convenience, but as a woman who had survived loss, as someone who had made the ultimate decision for the safety of her sister and her people. She reminded them softly yet firmly of the daughters, sisters, and mothers who would suffer if pride and anger were allowed to dictate their actions. The warriors' hands wavered above their weapons, the tension in their arms and shoulders easing with every passing second. Ravenwolf, standing beside her, lowered his own spear first, his dark eyes fixed on Aiyana with something akin to respect. Slowly, one by one, the other warriors followed suit. Weapons clattered to the ground, and the air that had been heavy with imminent violence became charged with relief and disbelief. Aiyana's chest heaved, but she held her head high. When the fighting ended, she was given a choice: to return home to her tribe or stay with Ravenwolf and the people she had helped protect. She looked toward the horizon where Nokomis waited, safe and alive, and then back at the man who had come to see her as more than a hostage. Aiyana chose to stay, not because she had no other path, but because she had earned her place by courage, sacrifice, and unwavering resolve. She had not simply survived. She had created peace, and in doing so, she proved that strength and wisdom often speak louder than any weapon. The morning sun rose slowly over the plains, painting the land in shades of golden amber. Yet the tension that clung to the air felt heavier than the dawn itself. Across the wide stretch of open ground, the two tribes faced each other in silence, their weapons poised, their horses restless, and their hearts bound by anticipation. Every man and woman seemed frozen, waiting for a single signal, a sound, or a movement that would ignite the chaos they had all feared. Amid this charged silence, Aiyana stepped forward, her boots sinking slightly into the dry, dusty earth. She moved with measured confidence, her every step carrying the weight of her choice, the burden of her sacrifice, and the quiet authority of someone who had seen the worst of life and refused to bow to it. Her eyes swept across the opposing warriors, noting the tension in their shoulders, the rigidity of their grips on their spears, and the flicker of doubt in some. Aiyana's long black hair fell loosely around her shoulders, catching the sunlight, and the fringed leather dress she wore clung to her form yet allowed freedom of movement. Beaded designs glinted subtly, echoing the skill and care of her people. She did not raise her voice with anger or fear, for she had learned that true strength lies in calm conviction. "I gave myself to end this war," she called, her voice firm yet unshaken, carrying across the field. "If blood is spilled again, my sacrifice will have been in vain." The warriors hesitated, their eyes drawn to her unwavering stance. She reminded them, not as a captive or bargaining piece, but as a woman who had endured loss and borne responsibility, that daughters, sisters, and mothers would pay the price if pride and revenge dictated their actions. The wind stirred, lifting the fringes of her dress, and the field seemed to hold its breath alongside her. Slowly, one by one, the combatants relaxed, their weapons lowering with reluctant understanding. Even Ravenwolf, the man who had once claimed her as a bride by agreement, stood beside her in quiet acknowledgement of her courage. As the last weapon clattered to the earth, a profound stillness settled over the plains. The war had been stopped, not by threats or force, but by the presence of a single, determined woman who chose peace over fear. When the decision came for her to stay or return home, Aiyana glanced toward the distant horizon where Nokomis waited, safe at last, and then back at the people who had come to respect her strength. She chose to stay, not as a captive, not as a reward, but as a leader, protector, and witness to the fragile, hard-won peace she had carved with her own hands. In that moment, Aiyana's name became more than a widow's. It became a symbol of courage, wisdom, and the enduring power of selfless resolve.